This is the second podcast for Chapter 12, and in my opinion, the ideas we'll talk about in this podcast are less important than the first podcast, which went over the 5 types of samples. But in here, we'll talk about types of biases that you need to be aware of. Okay? One thing to think about is exactly who or what is your population. Okay? And be very specific about this group. What group is it and when? Okay? So if you mean to study the students at Kinnick High School, are they the students right now? Or are they the students 5 years ago? So what group and when are you sampling? Okay? Also, to keep in mind that do you have everyone in your sampling frame? Have you missed the students who have moved in the past month? Because their opinions might be different than students who have been here for a year or more. Okay? How will you sample them? Will you call them on the phone? Will you find them on Facebook? Will you find them standing in front of the school? And how will those sampling methods affect bias? If you're standing in front of the school, are you going to miss the students who come really early or come late to school or take the bus? Okay, and that may create some bias in your study. So be very aware of that. Okay. Now, even if you select the perfect sample, there can still be bias. Okay, there can be response bias. So a few things to think about. Are you asking the right questions? Are there bias in how you're asking the question? Okay, if you're including extra information that may, persuade them to answer a certain way, that's creating bias in your study. It won't be a true representation. Okay, longer surveys tend to lead to non-response biases. If you say this is going to take 10 minutes, some people may not choose to respond to your survey. And you don't know if their opinions may be different from who you actually do sample. Okay, so keep your survey short and to the point, and you'll have less non-response bias. Okay, also asking for specific rather than general questions will give you better data to work with. Okay, instead of asking in general how long did you spend on Facebook, you may ask how long did you spend on Facebook yesterday. Okay, because that'll give a more specific and it'll give you better data to work with if you're specific as opposed to general. Okay. Also, as much as possible, ask for quantitative results. Avoid measurements of a lot or a little, because that could be different depending on who the person you're talking to. Okay. And this may not apply to you, but if you are working for a large company, you may want to run a pilot survey where you do a smaller version of the survey to see any potential problems that may happen before you launch a major survey. Okay, one last note about bias. Okay, there's no way to recover from bias from sampling methods or response bias. Okay, if there's bias in your data, there's no tricky formula or way to eliminate that. So you have to be aware of this before you begin taking your sample and asking questions and doing your survey, because if there's bias in there, you can't get rid of it.